Welcome to the Steelers Breakdown podcast featuring PennLive Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh, who's fresh from practice on Tuesday because the Steelers have a very short week to prepare for the Cleveland Browns on Thursday Night Football. It's one of those games coming after that earth-shaking, division-altering win against the Ravens on Sunday that feels like a trap. And we'll talk to Nick about what his view of this upcoming contest is first, very shortly. But we have to go back to that huge win over the Ravens, the arch rival Ravens. The Steelers didn't score a touchdown, but they didn't need any. We had Boswell's golden leg, and we had that swarming Steelers defense. I mean, they held Derrick Henry in check, and they made MVP Lamar Jackson look pedestrian. And it was all hands on deck. You had Nick Herbig creating havoc. You had Joey Porter Jr. stringing out that 2-point play that would have tied the game late. You had, of course, TJ Watt being his usual game-wrecking self. You had the damnedest interception I've ever seen by a rookie, Peyton Wilson, who came down with that contested ball and was a game-altering moment. You had Minkah Fitzpatrick playing deep downfield and preventing some splash plays with some sharp solo tackles. I mean, I'm missing other contributions on that game. But the question is, to Nick, first up, to tee it off for today's discussion, is this high-priced defense, has it finally arrived? Or are they going to keep getting better? What did you see in this game, and what bodes well moving forward down this gauntlet that the Steelers have of division games, and then Philly, and then the Chiefs as well mixed in there? What do you see with this defense?
Yeah, this is what we were talking about last week, where they were a top 10 defense, and I said I wanted to see them be top 3. And when you do this to the top-ranked offense in basically every category, that is an impressive game. I don't care how familiar the Steelers are with the Ravens, how much they have their number. That was a great game by this team. And, I think some of it, John, has been the game planning portions of it. I think Terrell Austin, Mike Tomlin, and that defensive staff as a whole have done a phenomenal job over the last 2 weeks. They have switched up their tendencies and flipped them on their head. That has been a big thing. They were a zone, cover 3, cover 1 team. That's all they ran. They still run predominantly, obviously, cover 3 and do all of that. That is their base. That is the Steelers, right? They are cover 3. They have those fire zone blitzes. They win up front. They have their blitzes, obviously. But the blitzing has gone way up. They play more man, and they mixed in the too high stuff when they needed to. They're keeping guys off balance. I think they did a great job containing Lamar Jackson. I think that is a big thing. They didn't sack him very often, but they were on him. And I think what they did with Lamar was they made him have to be the superhero version of Lamar every single down. And Lamar can make great plays, and he made a few of them, obviously, throughout the game, but he can't do it every single down. What the Steelers said is Lamar is going to have to be playing the best game of the season against us to beat us. And I think that was what they did. And it was little details like deciding when to run up in the secondary to go corral Lamar, or playing your zone and just kind of midpointing that, or how do you keep contained on the interior? Maybe you don't go and rush Lamar. Maybe you stay in that lane for a little longer, or get your hands up. Like, just things that are so little. I think, when we talk about little details, we also talk about, how the Steelers force fumbles at a very high rate. There are a lot of teams that don't strip the ball and punch at the ball like the Steelers do. They work on this since OTAs. They do it at rookie minicamp. It is a culture that this is Terrell Austin 100%. Before Terrell Austin came around, the Steelers' defense had a serious issue getting turnovers. He has created a ball-hawking culture, I think, that has permeated throughout this entire defense. I look at Patrick Queen's forced fumble. That was just a huge momentum swing right before the half. on a screen that was just called probably to end the half. I don't think it was anything more than that. And so what a play by him. This defense is just clicking. Last week against the Commanders, I thought they got torched in man coverage a little bit. Didn't show up because I thought their front was so good, and I think the front was excellent again against the Ravens. But I thought the real stars of this game that really stepped up. Obviously you saw Herbig play a great game. You saw, I think, Keanu Benton play his best game of the season. Cam Hayward and T.J. Watt were doing what they need to do. But I thought the real stars of this game were the secondary. I thought the secondary played awesome. I thought Joey Porter Jr. after what was probably his toughest game of the season against the Commanders with those 3 penalties and a few big catches to Terry McLaurin, just had a great game. I thought Dante Jackson was stable. He allowed that touchdown, but I thought he was better in man coverage. I thought Beanie Bishop played a really good game. Cam Sutton is back now. And then I think the Steelers' safety play has consistently been very good. All three of those safeties, I think, Minka Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott, and Devontae Casey all had good games. And then you talk about the linebackers. I think one of the biggest things that we have seen out of the bye, and I don't think this is it's a stretch to say, I think Patrick Queen has played his 2 best games in a Steelers uniform. I think this Ravens game was even better than the Commanders game. And he was everywhere against Washington, but you could tell he was a little bit energized to go out and get his former team. But he had that turnover. But there's an absurd rep where he turns and runs up the seam with Zay Flowers, a wide receiver. He allows them to do so much. He had a great game. I just thought this defense as a whole, it wasn't like they had a takeover, right? It wasn't like against Washington. I felt like that was a Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, Patrick Queen takeover. I thought the stars took over that game. This game, I didn't feel like one singular star took over the game. I thought all 14 guys, 15 guys that they used in that rotation played good games. And I think that's the sign of a good defense. Whenever they needed a big play, John, someone made one, right? You think about, the first drive of the game where Derrick Henry has a first down and is going to pop off a run, and Herbig comes from behind and just punches the ball out. You think about Russ throwing the pick, and then, okay, here go the Ravens, right? They might drive and take the lead. They are getting the momentum, and then Peyton Wilson makes that absurd play. You see on that 2-point conversion, 2 different guys make big plays. Nick Herbig penetrates first, and throws off the polars, and goes right through Nelson Aguilar. And then Joey Porter Jr. makes a big-time play. It just felt like every single time they needed a big play, someone stepped up. And it was almost always different players that stepped up, whether it was a Joey Porter Jr. PBU or, Dean Lowry coming in with Keanu Benton when he got hurt. I thought Dean Lowry's contributions down the stretch were really big. Like depth guys making plays. And I thought that was the big thing about this defense. And so this is the defense that I was talking about when I said at their peak, this is what they can be. That, what you saw, is the best defense in the NFL. If they play like that throughout the rest of the season, that will be the best defense in the NFL. Now, we'll see if they continue to maintain that, but that was a phenomenal performance. No team has figured out how to stop the Ravens this year. The Steelers were the first ones to do it, and it's not a blueprint that most people can execute. I've talked a lot on here about how I just didn't think it was a talent problem. They had the talent. They just needed to kind of work together and get things going. I think, those communication issues that were there early in the season are completely gone. The Ravens tried to kind of crack that nut, and the Steelers passed everything off very well. I think that they have just taken a leap here over the last 2 weeks where we've seen this team evolve to become a really multi-dimensional team. They can blitz you, they can play man, they can play zone, they can play their bread and butter, they can win with 4. And you can do so many different things with so many different players on the back end of the defense. And then I think you rely on stars like Patrick Queen and Minka Fitzpatrick and what they bring to the table. And it's so good to see them come together like that, because it really is beautiful. I think from a schematic point, Terrell Austin, Mike Tomlin, that staff deserve a ton of praise, and I think the players executed it about as well as you could have. No one tries to play hero ball. I think, when you are a superstar like a Watt, a Hayward, a Fitzpatrick, a Queen, you might want to. They didn't, and everybody stayed within themselves and have done a great job. And I think that's a big part of why they were able to slow down Lamar Jackson. They made him try hard for every single inch that he had to gain. And so I thought that was impressive. I thought their defensive performance was the best that they've had all season.
I think back to the tragedy that befell Ryan Shazier, and it seems like such a long time ago, but I know that the Steelers had been searching for someone to fill that huge void for all these years. And is it too simplistic to say that they finally done that with Patrick Queen and some of the other additions that they've made in the middle of that defense? Is that one of the last pieces of the puzzle here?
Well, I would say so because I have felt like in years past they've kind of had to scheme around a coverage weakness at that spot, right? They haven't had guys that necessarily can do what Patrick Queen does. The Steelers ask an awful lot of their inside linebackers. They do. Um, it is not an easy position to play in their scheme. They want you to man up on tight ends. If you can get on wide receivers, they want that. It is tough to be a linebacker in the Steelers scheme. They put a ton on you, specifically in this modern NFL where linebackers have to be that. And Queen is a guy that just solves all of that, right? I mean, listen, we saw solid linebacker play last year. I think the trio of Alan Roberts, Quan Alexander, and Cole Holcomb was a good one, but they still weren't elite in coverage. They still had warts there. And I think even though Alan Roberts really played his behind off at the end of last year as the linebacker that is where Patrick Queen is right now, that's not his game, right? He's not a coverage linebacker, but Alan Roberts has proven he can do it. But Patrick Queen has taken it to a whole new level, a whole new level. He looks like what the Ryan Shaziers of the world do in this defense. His speed is a complete game changer for them. It takes a lot of pressure off guys like Deshaun Elliott, and he can play fast. And whoever is next to him, I think when you have Alan Roberts next to him in the run defense part of this equation, I think that is a big weapon, right? Because Patrick Queen, I think his weakness is that run defense part where he kind of has to react and gets reached. He's not a great block shedder, but he is a phenomenal player just seeing it and running to the ball and getting around blocks. And he learned all of that from Roquan Smith because if you know Roquan Smith, the Ravens, his one weakness has always been block shedding. But when he is such a smart football player that he reads things, gets around it, and doesn't get touched. Patrick Queen has started to really, really take that. He plays aggressive. He is getting to the ball. And then when you have Elaine Roberts, who is just this absolute hammer on the other side, it's big. And then, you have Peyton Wilson, who is this other guy that's super versatile with coverage. He's still not all there yet because he's a rookie, but he's made some really good man coverage plays. I think it's the zone part of things that actually are going to come along with him more than man, as you saw with his ability to even get around the pick on that wheel route and then to recover and make the play. Just one of the more incredible interceptions I've seen, let alone from anybody but a linebacker. Reminds you a lot of. It's kind of interesting.
You can describe how he came down. What were the mechanics of football play that allowed him to come down with that football?
It's interesting. If you remember back in 2019 to Devin Bush's rookie year, he made it wasn't as it was kind of similar where Mark Andrews bobbled the ball, but then he got it. But that was with the bobble. Hill had this ball in his hands, and really Wilson went up through, his. So Hill basically did this, right, which is body catching it, and because he didn't hands catch it, it gave Wilson this ability to kind of come up through underneath. And basically all he did, it wasn't as much, a traditional catch. It was more like you're trying to force a fumble, right? You're trying to kind of rip it out. And so really when he had that ball there and was trying to bring it in, Wilson had his hand there and just went, he just pulled it from him. And it was while they were going to the ground, which is even more impressive because that's all arm strength when you're doing it from there.
Because if he gets on the ground, it's his ball. So he got that arm in there and at least started working it loose before he hits the ground.
And he had one arm under it. So Peyton Wilson never got the second arm under it. Jeez. He just took it and went bang down. And, that had to survive the ground too, right? Very easily could have just been incomplete, which still would have been a great play no matter what. But the fact that he actually picked it off, it is one of the more unbelievable interceptions I've seen from a linebacker ever. So unbelievable play. from Peyton Wilson. I just thought, that when you see a young guy like that make a play like that, that showcases not only good coaching because he knew the situation and how to get out of that, but showcases the talent they have in that room. And so, yeah, these three inside linebackers are working really well together. They've kind of flipped. I don't know if you guys, I don't know how many people have noticed this, but over the last 2 weeks, Alan Roberts and Peyton Wilson have flipped usage. Alan Roberts played 51% of the snaps in this one. Peyton Wilson only played, I think, 31%. So
Mm.
that used to be Peyton Wilson on the other side of that. But they're playing Alan Roberts more, which I think has done wonders to the defense. And I think it's helped Peyton Wilson not become overexposed and kind of learn, at a slower rate and get put into advantageous situations where he can make plays like that. And so I just think this linebacking core has done such a great job, and it's definitely been a big part of it because they're also blitzing a lot. And so, Queen's not only running in man coverage with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely or coming down to get Derrick Henry, he's also blitzing to Lamar Jackson or he's spying Lamar Jackson, he's doing all these different things. So when you have one player like Patrick Queen that can take up 4 or 5 roles in a defense and you don't know what he's going to do before the snap, it makes quarterbacks think a second because you have to move around the formation and kind of read what the Steelers are going to do. And so it makes you hold that ball for an extra hitch. And as we know, the Steelers have a front that can win very quickly. And obviously that causes pressure and sacks.
That's a great point, Nick, about the playing time split between Roberts and Wilson. And I have this image of Tomlin and Austin in this laboratory turning dials and just sort of fine tuning this defense. And I love what Tomlin said, after the game, responding to Queen coming over from the Ravens to the Steelers, and he said, "One man's trash is another man's treasure." Well, I'll take that kind of trash all day long if you're talking about Patrick Queen. Now, we take a look at the offense, and we look at Russell Wilson, and we had the end zone interception, and I want you to break down what happened on that play. But you had some interesting thoughts on the whole idea of the red zone passing attack, that you're seeing some major problems in the Steelers' red zone passing attack, and I want you to delve into that as well. We definitely didn't have the 30 plus points that we've seen in the last few games. So and some of that is this is a division arch rival that they know each other upwards and down. And even though all the pundits were expecting to smash the over, in this game, that this was going to be sort of a high scoring matchup, it turned into the slugfest that it was that we witnessed. But let's talk a little bit about that offense, the red zone passing attack. What happened on that interception?
Yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, listen, I think the Steelers were able to drive a little bit. I thought, I think that's bared out in the time of possession. They had 36 minutes of time of possession. They were able to run the ball far better than most teams were against this Ravens front. This was a tough Ravens front, and that O-line caved them in at times. I know the stats aren't going to pop off the page, but you watch the tape, it's a lot of fun. With guys like McCormick and Ciamalo and Frazier and Broderick even in this game really getting in there. I thought that was fun, but let's talk about the red zone. That is definitely the big negative. It's going to bite them at some point against a good team. It is. They can't keep doing that. They are the 30th best red zone offense in the NFL right now. Since Russell Wilson took over, I believe they are only converting 25% of their red zone drives into touchdowns. Now, they were good against Washington. Against the Jets, in a lot of those instances, they didn't score from the red zone. They scored outside the red zone. Against the Giants, we talked about this for the Giants game, right? They put up a goose egg there. And then they go 0 for 4 here. But they were driving the ball, which I think is good so it's not like the offense was dead, right? They were able to move the ball at times. I think Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson over the last 2 weeks a little bit have veered off the path of what made them successful in the first 2 games. I think, they have started to go a little too shotgun drop back heavy. I do not need to see Russell Wilson having 25 true dropbacks in a game. I just don't. I don't need this version of him to do that. Now, it's a limitation on the offense, and you say, is that a limitation? Yes, it is. and that's going to cap the ceiling to a degree on the offense. But they don't need it in this game, right? The defense is playing extremely well. It's not like when they were against the Commanders, right? They didn't fall behind 10 points. They didn't need to do that. So to me, I think they need to get back to simplifying some things. And what I mean by that is I want to see more, let's get under center more. Let's do more play action. The play action game has kind of died a little bit, too. That's been an issue. But they're not going to see a ton of teams that play like how the Ravens did. The Ravens doubled, I think, their usage of cover two in this game, and just took away the sidelines. Right? They were like, "You're not getting into George Pickens. You're not getting into Mike Williams. Go to the middle of the field." And we know Russ does not generally throw to the middle of the field, and Arthur Smith, because Russ doesn't tend to throw to the middle of the field, does not really dial up a ton of plays to the middle of the field. And I thought when you saw later in the game, when you started to see some of those later drives, the two big explosives to Darnell Washington, I think they started to kind of creep to that. So that's interesting. But when we get to the red zone, I think the issue becomes I think there's three issues. I think one, I think Russ is an issue. I think two, the receivers are an issue. And then I think three, Arthur Smith is an issue. And I should say four, because I also think the run game is an issue. So let's start at the run game, because I think it all starts here. When they get first and goal from the 8 and you get 0 or 1 yard on first down, you are put in elongated situations. You naturally are. So it makes passing the football harder, because the teams know you're going to pass the football in many of those situations, because it's essentially second and long. And most teams just don't, run the ball in second and long. The Steelers need to, I think, instead of there were a lot of plays when they got in there where they went shotgun or did their basic outside zone stuff. They didn't really go to the gap stuff, the inside zone, the Zorro toss stuff that we've seen that worked through the game. They kind of went to their bread and butter. I think they need to kind of start getting a little meaner down there. What I mean by that is run duo, run inside zone. I don't love running pull. I don't love running the gap stuff, but from 7-8 yards out, I think it's a play. So they need to start becoming more efficient running the ball on first down. Arthur Smith mentioned that today, because it limits your playbook and teams are going to pack the paint on you. And when that happens, they play zone. They don't play man. And I think this is where Arthur Smith comes in. He has plays that are designed to beat man, but I don't see, plays that are designed to find the soft spot in the zone. I don't see plays that foil zone defenses inside a red zone. And this is a commonality under Arthur Smith. It's not something that is new for a struggle for him. His offenses in Atlanta were not good red zone offenses. That was a big issue for him in Atlanta. You look at where he was. Let's go through 2021, 24th in the league in red zone offense. 2022 was better. He was 14th. 2023 was 29th. And this year he's 30th right now. And so it's been an issue. Now, 2019 in Tennessee, through 10 games, they were 26th in red zone offense, and they finished 7th. So after that, they were the top red zone offense in the league. So what I'm trying to say is they have figured it out. Arthur Smith has figured this out before. So it's not like it's not something he hasn't foiled before. But that is an issue. The route concepts, and I think when you talk about what happened on Russ's interception, no one's open. Russ bails the pocket, wants to make a play happen, throws up to a 6'7" tight end. I think it floated a little bit too far over him, and naturally it's picked. I think, could Washington maybe made a better play on it? Sure. But, in that situation, if I were Russ, knowing how the defense is playing, throw it out of the back of the end zone, get balls on the field, kick the field goal, you're up 8. And so instead of trailing, if they score a touchdown, you are at worst tied. That's how I would have played that situation if I were Russ. So let's go to Russ then. We talk about how Smith had struggled with the zone beating concepts. Part of this is Russ too. Russ has had a few chances at times and won't let it rip. And I thought that wasn't just a red zone issue. I thought in this game specifically, that was a whole issue for Russ. He held the ball a little long at times. Russ needs to play more in structure. I think at this stage in his career, I know Russ has been, a backyard football, rust ball guy, right? How many times throughout his career in Seattle did you see him just run around the pocket and out of structure make something happen where you're like, how did that happen? Um, this stage in his career, you can go to that, but it's not really what you want Russ doing a ton of. I thought he relied a little bit too much on it. I thought actually, outside of some early first quarter struggles from Jones, I thought the O line was fine in pass pro. And I thought Russ created some of the pressure for himself. So I think they need to get Russ just kind of on schedule, clicking that ball out a little faster, like he was against the Jets and the Giants. And I think I think in the second half against the Commanders, he was also in that group. He just didn't look comfortable in this game against the Ravens. So definitely want to see him do that. And so sometimes there are guys that maybe could be open, and he just bails on it and is what it is. But there's also wide receivers sometimes within feet of each other in the same zone. So the wide receivers, guys running wrong routes, guys not having the correct spacing, how to run this route in this area. There's a play where George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, and Calvin Austin are all standing in a triangle within 3 yards of each other. I mean, you can't do that in a packed end zone. There's also a play, the Van Jefferson drop on, I believe it was 3rd and 6 from the 8. They could have had a first down if they got to the 2. This is part of the Arthur Smith issue. You go and look at that play. It is a mirrored concept with 2 outs and 2 hitch routes. I don't know what you're supposed to do with that. Russ went to the right guy. If Jefferson catches it and he's not getting the first down anyways, it's just play calls that don't make a ton of sense. Doesn't put your guys in advantageous spots to make plays happen. So I think the red zone offense has 4 issues, but I would honestly put about 75% of the blame on play calling right now because I just think teams are going, to zone on second and longer. If they run the ball better, it'll make it a lot easier for the Steelers, I think, to get going. So running the ball is a nice, fix to it. Maybe you go to Justin Fields there. Maybe, you find an under center power running game a little more. But I do think play calling, when you look at the spacing of these routes, how guys are running them, and then kind of not having answers for zone coverage in those tight areas, I think is a significant issue. But I think the 2 biggest issues that we saw on the offensive side of the football were probably one. I think Arthur Smith and kind of Russell Wilson kind of went too drop back heavy. And then I think, 2, I just didn't think we saw a lot of separation from the wide receivers. I thought those were the 2 issues why they stagnated against this defense a little more than they would have. But we have seen Russ have that quick stuff out. We've seen Russ do it. So I think it's just about getting Russ reset and kind of going back to the formula where, you go under center more, you lean into that play action a little more. You try to go to the screen game a ton, limit his true drop backs because you can maximize Russ in that way. You get moments of wow when you kind of understand Russ in this system doesn't have to be the hero. And I think Russ tried to be the hero a little too much at times on Sunday. And I think that's kind of where I go when I talk about that is Russ can manage in this offense. He doesn't need to be the superhero. So I do think, when you manage Russ correctly, you get moments where he makes that throw to Mike Williams or makes that gorgeous throw to George Pickens or that gorgeous throw to Van Jefferson in the Giants game. So there are a few things to fix, but that's kind of the overall issues I saw on Sunday. And a lot of those are not issues that showed up in previous games. I wanted to kind of say that. So I think that is something that is not a pattern. It is a 1-game sample size. So let's not talk about it like it's a huge issue. The red zone issues, I think the play calling red zone issues are a multi-game pattern. That's why I go to that first when I say what can be fixed, what Arthur Smith calls against zone coverages in the red zone, I think is a big part of that.
Hey, good analysis, Nick. And the one thing I will say in terms of the chance of some of this recurring down the line is, being a copycat league, if other teams try to take away the sidelines, that could be an issue for Wilson and the Steelers offense. And a couple quick notes, on the Washington interception, Tomlin was invited by the press to critique that play or and he just said simply, "I wish Russ wouldn't have thrown the ball." And he was also invited to criticize Broderick Jones, who had a couple of penalties and some pass blocking breakdowns, and he just would not go there at all, and said, "We're not going to blink." And he gave quite a bit of praise to the second-year offensive lineman. One last question before we move to the game that awaits us Thursday night. Given all those issues that you just talked about on offense and with the running game in particular and down by the red zone, we saw some Justin Fields packages rolled out. Is there a chance that we get a package in the red zone to solve some of those issues that you mentioned?
For sure. I think that is part of it. I think he adds obviously a new dimension to it. Like, listen, I thought it wasn't just a Russ issue. Like, the red zone play calling has been an issue since Justin was in there.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't had zone beaters, but the difference was Justin could just run and
Mm-hmm.
get it. And so I think that's part of what Justin brings that appeals to it. You have a bailout of jail free card where, well, if something breaks down, Justin can just go and run. He has that explosiveness to beat guys. And so, yeah, I think a Justin Fields package in the red zone makes a lot of sense. And I don't just want it to be Justin running. I want pass plays for Justin. I want all of that. So I do think we'll see that probably. I don't know if we'll see it this week, but I do think we'll see it eventually to try and fix these red zone woes. And so, yes, I do think that is a very likely possibility that we eventually see it. I don't think it's a cure all. Again, I do not. I think the biggest way that they can improve this right away is by altering their schematics, looking at it, and trying to figure out what concepts in the playbook is Russ comfortable with, are the receivers comfortable with against zone when teams give us that. Now, if they're playing man, obviously, Steelers will be fine and dandy, and it's pretty much mirrored to the Steelers' success this year of man coverage. When they face man coverage, they've been pretty good in the red zone. They were faced a lot of man coverage against the Commanders in the red zone, and they were pretty good there. Same thing with the Jets, pretty good man coverage heavy team. This week they face the most man coverage heavy team in the entire NFL, so I expect them to be pretty solid in the red zone this week against the Browns. But when they face zone teams that kind of roll towards that, like the Ravens did, I think that's where they're going to have trouble, and they're going to have to figure it out. That kind of foil.
And let's talk about those Browns because we have the Steelers now in command of the AFC North, coming off a massive win, pretty much in control of their destiny in the playoffs, even including for the number one seed if they keep winning. But then you have this Thursday night game against a lesser opponent, and we know the history of Tomlin teams who have these inexplicable letdown games. So, how much peril do you see awaiting the Steelers in Cleveland, knowing that some of your colleagues out in Pittsburgh, at least one that I know of, are suggesting that he's going to pick the Browns over the Steelers this Thursday, which would erase so much of the advantage that they have just taken by this win on Sunday. So, what do you see awaiting these Steelers in this weird Thursday night matchup against another division rival, the Browns?
Well, division game on a short week. They are coming. Steelers have played two absolutely physical games. That Commanders game was super physical. And then obviously Steelers Ravens is a dogfight in the trenches. The Steelers are beat up. There's no doubt about it. They need that 10-day rest like no one's business. And so you do set up with two wins that the Steelers, win over two really good teams. That is a classic letdown spot right here, right? And listen, the Browns look awful. They do. You watch the Saints game and you're like, wow, this team is not great, but they have talent, and they're a 2-8 team that still has problems. You look at guys like Chubb and Njoku, and still have a solid receiving core. Their defense does still have talent. That secondary is veteran laden, and you have guys like Denzel Ward still there, and obviously you have to always worry about Myles Garrett. But this team right now, this Browns team, kind of looks like they're just lost in it. Don't have good quarterback play. Jameis Winston is a complete gunslinger.
Mm-hmm.
Jameis Winston is a guy that just bombs it away. I mean, it does not matter how tight a window you give him; he just throws it there, and that is both good and bad for the Steelers. I think it's good though because high pick variance there could get a few interceptions in this game. I would be remiss to not mention the weather. It is expected to be absolutely hellacious. It is supposed to be 40 degrees, 40-mile-per-hour winds coming right off Lake Erie, and probably sleet. And so it is going to be potentially, instead of those Jameis Winston, throwing it 20 yards down the field and Russ throwing moon balls, we very well might see a game that's won on the ground. That would play right into the Steelers' favor here, because for sure, this Browns team are 25th in EPA per rush. I think they're 26th in success rate allowed. They are not a good run defense unit. Now they have guys. I think they're better than their talent says. Like they're underperforming their talent significantly there because you look at Dalvin Tomlinson in the middle. They have some players. It's just I don't know what's going on there with them, but their secondary has a bunch of communication issues. They really can only play man right now unless they bust coverages in zone because they bust a ton of coverages in zone. And so you're probably going to see a lot of man to man, single high, middle of the field closed. So you'll have opportunities for Pickens and Williams and those guys to win contested jump balls down the sideline. Um, but this run game is probably going to be how the Steelers go about it. And there's a ton of things to suggest they should be able to run the football. There is. You look at how Taysom Hill just diced them up. Could that be a harbinger of what the Steelers could do with Justin Fields? Right? Could they mirror a game plan there and do different things there? I mean, there's a lot that you can attack here, but there is a storm where the Steelers absolutely can lose this game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Underestimating a 2-8 opponent, even if it's a divisional opponent, it's on the road, it's on a short week, and the weather conditions are going to be absolutely awful. And again, they are really beat up in the trenches. So, maybe they allow too much ground game, et cetera, et cetera. There is definitely a formula for them to lose this game. There's no doubt about it. And if you think the Browns are going to lay down, with the Steelers coming to town, you'd be wrong. And the Steelers went up here last year. They faced Dorian Thompson Robinson and an undermanned Browns team last year
Hmm.
and lost in Cleveland. So they haven't won in Cleveland since Ben's last year. They've lost 2 in a row up here in Cleveland. It's hard to win on the road in your division, period, even if the team is bad. So it's a tough assignment, even if they're 2-8. And so, yeah, the Steelers on paper should win this game, but there are factors that can definitely come to a letdown game. Now, the players that were here last year, do not forget that Patriots Cardinals stretch where they lost both
Mm-hmm.
games last year and had to claw out late in the year. So I don't think they're going to come into this one overlooking the Browns, but I do think there are other factors with how beat up they are. The short week, road, weather, all of these things that come together that can absolutely give the Browns quite a formula um, to win. And so we'll see. The matchup on paper definitely favors the Pittsburgh Steelers, no doubt about it. But we'll see because all those factors that we talked about could also lend them to a very surprising loss, obviously. And that would wipe off a lot of progress because you look at their next 3 games being Browns, Bengals, Browns, and when you beat when you win 5 straight and you beat the Ravens and the Commanders, I like the Bengals. I think they're much better than their 4-7 record says. But when you are the Steelers, even if those are 2 road games and 3 division games, I look at that and I want to go 3-0.
Hmm.
You want to go 3-0 because after that stretch, it's Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs. Because that 3-game set is going to be huge. So if you win these 3, you're 11-2 going into that stretch, and you're set up for a potential 1-seed pursuit. And the Steelers should want that 1 seed because you want the road to go through Acrisure Stadium.
There you have it, Steelers Nation. True peril could await this Steelers team that is riding so high, along with your spirits as Steelers fans. But we'll see what happens when the dust settles in this inclement weather game at the Mistake by the Lake. We'll know the outcome late on Thursday night, and we'll be back here next Tuesday to talk about either Steelers continuing their playoff push momentum or a major reversal in fortune. Until then, go Steelers, and we'll see you back here next Tuesday.